The Ghost Army, the secret World War II unit that fooled the Germans. World War II was a war of tanks, planes, battleships, but also of secrets, misinformation, and cunning. While millions of soldiers fought on the front lines, there was one small unit whose mission was entirely different. They weren't there to fight. They were there to pretend. This is the true story of the Ghost Army, a group of just 1,100 men who staged some of the most daring and creative military deceptions in history. Armed not with rifles and grenades, but with inflatable tanks, massive loudspeakers, and the skills of artists and actors, they tricked the Nazis again and again. For decades, their story was hidden from the world. The problem the Ghost Army was born to solve. By the summer of 1944, the Allies had landed in Normandy and were pushing across France. But the Germans were far from beaten. Every mile gained came at a cost in blood. If the Allies could mislead the German High Command, make them believe a major attack was coming in the wrong place, they could divert enemy troops, ease the way for real attacks, and save thousands of lives. The British had already proven the value of deception in North Africa, where fake tanks and dummy camps had been used to fool the Desert Fox, Field Marshal Erwin Rommel. The US Army wanted their own specialist deception unit for the European front, and they wanted it fast. The making of the Ghost Army. The army began recruiting men with unusual skills: artists, set designers, actors, radio operators, sound engineers, and even fashion designers. These men came from advertising agencies, art schools, and Broadway stages. One recruit, Bill Blass, would go on to become a world-famous fashion designer. Another, Ellsworth Kelly, would later become a celebrated painter. Instead of practicing with rifles, they practiced with air compressors and paintbrushes. They learned how to quickly set up inflatable tanks that looked convincing from a distance, how to make wooden artillery barrels that could fool reconnaissance pilots, and how to mimic the behavior of real soldiers in the field. The three pillars of deception. The Ghost Army's tactics were built on three main elements: visual deception, inflatable tanks, trucks, jeeps, artillery pieces, even fake aircraft. These were painted and placed in realistic positions, complete with fake tire tracks and camouflage nets. Audio deception. Giant speakers mounted on trucks, blasted recordings of tanks moving, engineers hammering, men shouting orders. The sounds were recorded in real army camps and could be mixed like a DJ to match the desired illusion. They could be heard from 15 miles away. Radio deception. Skilled operators sent out fake radio messages, imitating the traffic of entire divisions. They learned the fingerprints of actual operators so that enemy listeners believed they were hearing the real thing. First missions. The Ghost Army first saw action shortly after D-Day in Normandy. They were tasked with creating the illusion that large US forces were preparing to attack in an area where the real forces weren't. Over a few days, they inflated dozens of dummy tanks, set up fake artillery, and blasted the sound of armored units at night. German reconnaissance aircraft took the bait, and enemy troops were shifted to face an attack that never came. Operation in Belgium. Later that year, in Belgium, the Ghost Army was ordered to impersonate the 6th Armored Division. They set up hundreds of dummy vehicles and began playing the sounds of tanks clanking down the roads. Men were sent into nearby towns, dressed in uniforms with fake insignias, casually chatting in cafes about tomorrow's big push. Local informants passed this to German intelligence, exactly as planned. The Germans held back forces to counter the Phantom Division, giving the real 6th Armored an easier advance. The Rhine River Mission. Perhaps their most dangerous assignment came in March 1945 at the Rhine River. This was the last major natural barrier before entering Germany, and the Germans had fortified it heavily. The Allies planned to cross at one location, but needed the enemy to believe they were crossing somewhere else. The Ghost Army went to work. They inflated over 600 tanks and artillery pieces. They set up entire fake camps, tents, supply depots, motor pools. They blasted the sounds of construction and tank movements across the river. Radio operators kept up the illusion with constant, believable chatter. They were so close to the front that they were in range of German artillery. If discovered, they could have been wiped out. But the deception worked. The Germans concentrated their defenses miles from the actual crossing point, allowing the Allies to cross with far fewer casualties. Life in the Ghost Army. Daily life for these men was part soldier, part stagehand, and part actor. They carried patch kits to repair inflatable vehicles, because even a single tear could ruin the illusion. They studied the habits of real divisions so they could mimic everything from how laundry was hung to the way officers walked through camp. Veteran Arthur Shilstone remembered setting up in a French field and watching farmers stare in confusion as tanks seemed to appear in a single afternoon. Bill Blass recalled spending long nights sewing fake patches by hand. Every detail mattered. One wrong move, one out-of-place item, and enemy reconnaissance could spot the trick. More missions and impact. In all, the Ghost Army conducted more than 20 deception operations across France, Belgium, Luxembourg, and Germany. They impersonated entire corps and divisions, drawing enemy fire away from real troops, buying time for units to regroup, and masking Allied movements. Historians estimate that their work may have saved tens of thousands of lives, and they did it without ever firing a shot in anger. The secret kept for 50 years. When the war ended in 1945, the Ghost Army's work remained classified. Even their families didn't know the truth. The official files were locked away, and the unit was never mentioned in most histories of the war. It wasn't until 1996 that their story was declassified. Suddenly, the world learned of the artists, actors, and engineers who had fought with creativity instead of bullets. In 2022, the US Congress awarded the Ghost Army the Congressional Gold Medal, finally recognizing their extraordinary service. Legacy. The Ghost Army's methods inspired later military deception units and even influenced psychological warfare tactics in the Cold War. Their story is a testament to the power of ingenuity under pressure, and to the idea that sometimes the deadliest weapon in war is the human imagination. Today, only a handful of Ghost Army veterans are still alive. They remember their time not as a story of killing, but of protecting, by making the enemy believe in an army that didn't exist. As Arthur Shilstone put it, "We weren't killing the enemy, we were fooling them, and that saved lives." If you enjoyed this deep dive into one of World War II's strangest and most brilliant stories, subscribe for more incredible true history, because sometimes the most unbelievable battles never happened at all. This version should run about 15 minutes, at a natural YouTube narration pace, with pauses and dramatic emphasis. If you want, I can now make another 15-minute WE script about a completely different real story, so you can turn this into a multi-video series. Would you like me to?